Hello everybody, welcome to True Fan Forum. I'm your host Jay. In this video I want to talk about a very interesting but lesser known comic book, The Saga of Crystar, the Crystal Warrior. Now this comic book was published by Marvel Comics in 1983 and consisted of 11 issues. The concept creation for this comic book is credited to Ralph Macchio, Jim Shooter and Mark Grunwald, and concept design is credited to John Romita Jr. So right off the bat, there's some pretty big names associated with the development of this comic. Now the actual issues were written by Mary Jo Duffy and featured a few different artists. Now the first two issues were drawn by Brett Belving. The third issue was drawn by Ron Frenz, and the rest of the issues were drawn by Ricardo Villamonte. Now before I discuss the comic book anymore, I do want to take a bit of time to talk about the toy line associated with this comic book. Now the toy line was created by Remco, and from what I read consisted of some action figures, some playsets, and some vehicles. Now with this comic book being a fantasy comic book, these vehicles consisted of dragons pulling chariots, which sounds like such an awesome idea. Ugh. And sadly, I really have no experience with these toys. I mean, I don't own any of them. I don't think I've ever even really seen them in real life. At most, I've watched a couple of videos that talk about the toys. But I've seen on the videos, they look cool. I mean, they look well made. They come with a lot of accessories, and the Crystal Warriors, the good guys, were made out of a colored, transparent plastic, which I guess made them look more like crystal. Again, they look cool, and I have to say that even though I'm not much of a toy collector, if I happen to find these toys out there somewhere in like a swap meet or comic book convention or whatnot, if they weren't that expensive, I think I would buy them. Because again, they look pretty awesome. Now, as I was doing research for this comic book, I found that there's a bit of a misconception people have with the toys and comics, where people believe that the toy line was created first and Remco reached out and created a licensing deal with Marvel to make a comic book. However, that's not true. In fact, the opposite is true, where Marvel created the concept of the comic first, and as they were developing it, they reached out to Remco to create a deal to make a toy line based on the comic book. Now, I think this misconception might stem due to when the toys and the comics were released, with the toy line being released in late 1982 and the comic book released in spring of 1983. Now, why this happened, I have absolutely no idea. I didn't see anything written about it. It just happened. I don't know, maybe Marvel thought it was best to let the toy line be created first, create some buzz that way, and then release the comic book. I don't know. This is what happened. I just thought I'd throw it out there as a bit of interesting trivia. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back to the comic book. Now, this comic book takes place in the world of Crystalium and generally focuses in or around the city of Galax. Now, according to the comic's backstory, a few years before the events of the comic books, the city of Galax was besieged by the horrific, evil forces of the demon lord Chaos. Now, while the defenders of Galax fought bravely to save their city and their people, they were just no match for the demons and the monsters of Chaos, and many brave warriors lost their lives, including the king of Galax. But when all hope seemed lost, when it seemed that utter defeat was at hand, salvation came in the form of Ogio, a wizard in the service of order. And Ogio used his power and a magical artifact he created called the Prisma Crystal to drive away the forces of Chaos. But before Chaos fled, he created a curse that said one day he would send a new minion to Galax, and that minion would sow dissent among the people, turn brother against brother, and cause, well, chaos. Now, as I said, many brave warriors lost their lives, including the king. So rulership of the city would eventually go to his twin sons, the princes Crystar and Moltar. Now I say eventually because at the time of the king's death, the princes were apparently a bit too young to take the throne and become co-kings. So instead, the regency of the kingdom fell to their uncle, the diminutive Feldspar, until the princes reached, I guess, the proper age. Now, the first issue is set a few months after the events, after the War of Chaos, and we find the princes, their uncle, and a few loyal retainers having a pleasant evening in the throne room, playing games. One man's playing music, the princes are wrestling, a nice night. But then, in a flash of light and thunder and other various dramatics, Ogiode appears to warn all those assembled that the time of the curse is at hand. A minion of chaos is coming. And unfortunately, he pretty much would be helpless to defend the city. But you see, the war with chaos greatly diminished Ogiode's powers. In fact, he could pretty much do little more than warn the princes and their uncle that trouble was coming. In fact, according to him, what's the point of being a seer if you just don't have anyone to tell what you see? So, yeah, kind of a letdown to be told, hey, guess what? Trouble's brewing, and I could do bupkis to help you. Yeah. So shortly after Ogio's departure, and with another equally dramatic flare of light and thunder and, magic, another wizard appears. And this wizard's name was Zardef, and he represented chaos. In fact, he was the very minion of chaos the curse warned about. But he did not come to bring destruction to Galax, no. Instead, he came with an offer for the princes, that if they would swear unwavering loyalty to chaos, then they, their people, and the city of Galax, and all Crystallium would be spared, sort of. And then, pretty much as soon as he arrived, he left to let the princes mull over his offer. Now, the appearance of these two wizards and the trouble they foretold caused a schism to develop between the brothers. Now, Crystar believed that they should ally with Ogiode. After all, he did help defend Galax once from the forces of chaos, and it seemed like at this time he needed their help. And really, why would you want to ally yourself with the very people that tried to destroy you years ago and killed your father? But Moltar had a different idea. He believed that perhaps it would be best to ally with chaos. I mean, after all, Ogio is pretty much useless. Said he's pretty much useless. They barely won the War of Chaos in the first place, so yeah, maybe it would be best to ally with chaos. It probably wouldn't be a good existence, but it's better than horrible screaming death. Now, this schism combined with a bit of perhaps an inferiority complex and some sibling rivalry caused tensions to grow and grow until it culminated in a big fight between the princes where Moltar hurt his uncle and seemingly killed his brother Crystar. Oh no! So, and while Moltar was overcome with this sense of, oh my gosh, what did I do? I hurt my uncle. I think I killed him. I killed my brother. What did I do? That shock combined with, I guess, his thinking, okay, what am I going to tell people? What am I going to do? Now, while he was distracted in this way, a loyal retainer dragged Crystar and his uncle Feldspar away to the waiting wizard Ogio to see what can Ogio do to help. Now, interestingly, even though Ogio said he was pretty powerless, he still had a few tricks to pull off the old top hat. One thing he did was to use the Prisma Crystal to help heal Crystar, and I'll explain exactly what he did in a moment. Now, another trick he did was to use his magical powers to drive away Moltar and his most fervent followers. Unfortunately, he drove Moltar and his band right into the waiting arms of Zardef, who promised to give Moltar and his group power in exchange of them swearing loyalty. So Moltar and the others did, and Zardef gave them power by turning him into beings made out of magma. And I'm sorry, I have to say this, Durner and me just has to do it. Magma? Now, with that out of the way, let me show you a picture to kind of show you what these newly transformed magma men, as they're called, look like. Now, in this picture, we see Moltar, who's on the throne, and a woman named Lavor, who's right behind him. Now, Lavor acts as his lover and sort of the devil on his shoulder, kind of urging him on when perhaps he kind of questions his pact with Zardef and Chaos. Now, newly transformed, the Magma Men and Moltar invade the city seeking to take it over. But thankfully, there is a bright spot. As I said earlier, OGO used the Prisma Crystal to help heal Crystar, and he did this by transforming Crystar into a being of living crystal. You get it? You see what they did there? Crystal, Crystar. Gee, I wonder how I came up with that name. Anyway, newly transformed, Crystar saw what was happening with his newly transformed brother and the Magma Man, and he rushed out to defend his people. Now, unfortunately, even though the process may have turned him stronger and more durable than he once was, he was still one man against many. So, fearing for their prince's safety and the safety of all of Galax, a few of Crystar's most loyal warriors had OGO transform them into beings of crystal. And here's a little picture to show you who they are and what they look like. Now, very quickly, going from the top centralmost figure, the big guy, we have Warbo, Koth, Calabar, and Stalax. With their new crystal bodies, they joined their prince and managed to defeat and drive away Moltar and the Magma Men. At least for now. Now, this is basically the general setup of the comic book. Before I go in there is one more transformation I should discuss because it's a very interesting transformation. Now, as I said before, Feldspar, who was wounded but apparently recovered from his wounds and saw what happened, was overcome with grief and dismay. You see, Feldspar loved both of his nephews equally and always tried to be a sort of a neutral agent between them, showing neither prince more favor than the other. Now, to show this neutrality and his ongoing devotion to both nephews, he approached the wizards OGL and Zardef, and had them transform him into a being that is half crystal and half magma. And here's what he looks like afterwards. Yeah, it's an odd look, and honestly, as the series goes on, he becomes a very odd character, really sort of erratic. And I'm not sure if that's because of the process, the transformation, or he was just an odd guy all to begin with. But anyway, I just want to show you a few of the transformations that happen in this comic book. Now, there are a lot of other characters I can go into and some plot points, but because I really don't want to make this video too long, I'm sadly going to have to put them by the wayside. But hey, look at this way. Now you have the joy of discovering these characters on your own. Now, with that general premise out of the way, let me go into a couple things that I found interesting about the comic book. One thing I really loved about this comic book was the dynamic between Crystar and Moltar, because it's not your typical hero-villain dynamic where they're constantly fighting. It's like, I will destroy you! No, I will destroy you! Blah, 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 blah. No. Because they're brothers, because they're twins, there is a bond that exists between them. It might be strained to the point of almost breaking, but it still exists. So because of that bond, because of the fact that they are brothers who once were devoted to each other, you see a great deal of dismay over the current state, and sometimes a bit of reticence to fight. However, that dismay, that reticence, does not keep them from fighting, because apparently, they decided, you know what, we have chosen very different sides, and it just seems conflict is inevitable. Which again, I love, because it makes the characters interesting. It has something unique to comic books, and plus, it kind of makes Moltar an interesting villain, because he's not a completely evil villain. He's not I will destroy my brother and rule Galax. No, he feels that what he's doing is in his way best for the citizenry. And he does, he does seem to have moments where he feels that perhaps he chose the wrong side, that maybe he made a mistake in choosing chaos. But again, this sort of hesitation doesn't really last very long, and he does continue to fight for chaos and fight against his brother. Again, I love that dynamic. It adds an interesting spin to your classic hero villain, rivalry. That I thought was very interesting and extremely well done. I mean, I do enjoy the writing of this series. Mary Jo Duffy creates some very interesting characters, very unique, very human in their appearance. Not in their appearance, but in their depictions. For example, one of the Crystal warriors, Calabar, is not just a seasoned veteran warrior. He is a devoted family man who would give anything to protect his wife and 2 children. And I just love that idea. And one thing I also want to discuss a bit about is the artwork of the comic books, because you have different artists on this comic book, the art style changes. You can really see that the different artists really want to make their own spin on this comic book and really try to make it their own. Just make Crystallium. There we go. Its own unique world. Now, here's a couple of examples to show you just how the art style changes. Really, not just the art style, but just the very design and feel of the comic book changes. The first example I want to give you is Crystar, the Crystal Warrior. Now, at the first issue, this is what Crystar looks like when he's transformed. And you can see, it's an interesting look. It's a very faceted look, kind of like he's a carved jewel, which I find interesting. Now, pretty much after the first issue, Crystar's look changes dramatically, and he now looks like something like this. As you can see, again, it's very, very different. His appearance is much smoother. The color of his skin, I guess if you want to call it, changes. And he wears a lot more clothing, which is okay. Now, I think the reason for the first look was to make the Crystar and the figures involved look more like the toys, which is understandable and nothing wrong with that. But I have to say, I do like Crystar's later look. It looks interesting. It's just something about it just captures my attention and captures my eye in a way the first design, while interesting, doesn't. Now, another way I want to show you how the artwork changes and how the whole concept of the comic book changes is how the world looks. Now, in the first issue, Crystallium looks something like this. As you can see, an interesting design. That big structure you see is the Crystal Palace. Again, interesting look, nice design. I have some appeal to it. Now, here is what the world of Crystallium looks like in later issues. And look, I tell you, folks, I don't know this, but I just love this design more because it feels more alien, more fantasy driven. This world is its own world, and I love the design. Oh, in case you're wondering, that dome-like structure with the other little domes on it and the spikes, it's actually the Crystal Palace. So right there, dramatic change in concepts. I have to say that I like the artwork of the later issues more, and I like how the Crystal Warriors and the world is presented. There's just something about it that just captures me more. It appeals to me more. I think part of that in the first issue, things have a weird flat look to it. Now, I'm not saying I don't like Brett Belving's work. He's got some interesting ideas and some interesting work. I don't know. It feels, like I said, flat. Maybe it has something to do with the colors and the inking done with it. I don't know. It's good, but I much prefer everything, the artwork in the later issues. It's just more appealing to me. Again, there's pros and cons to both styles, but overall, I like the later look. Okay. Design, we covered design, we covered that. What I should discuss is that this comic book, it does connect with the greater Marvel multiverse. And these connections come through the use of guest appearances. Yeah. Characters from the main Marvel comic books do appear in this series. Specifically, we see Doctor Strange, Nightcrawler from the X-Men, and a few members of the Canadian superhero team Alpha Flight in this comic book, which I think is cool. Like I said, it helps connect this comic book series with the greater Marvel multiverse. So it's not just its own thing floating around its own little special universe. I can understand why they would want to have guest appearances. Because again, this is a new comic book. People probably haven't heard of it. So having more recognizable characters probably helps draw the eye and go, oh, hey, I know that guy. Wait, what's he doing in this comic book? Huh, I think I'll pick this up. So again, cool guest appearances. How they fit into the storylines of those particular issues is interesting. So yeah, I have no problem with that. One thing I will say though, and I'm so happy about, is that even though this series only lasted 11 issues, the last issue does have a satisfying conclusion. It's not one of these horrible things where there's just this big cliffhanger or there's going to be just a big event that they promise to, conclude next issue, but next issue never comes. I hate when it happens, whether it's on a TV show or a comic book. I hate that cliffhanger ending because it's never going to happen. So I am happy to say that this comic book does have a beginning, a middle, and what I would say is a very satisfying end. You're not left hanging. Yeah. So I'm happy to say that. Now, even now, another thing I need to bring up is that even though this comic book was created in the 80s, and it really wasn't used much afterwards, it was not completely forgotten. In fact, we see these characters again, and recently, specifically in the big Secret Wars event of just a couple years ago. Now, we see some figures from this series, the Magma Man and some of the Crystal Warriors in the Secret Wars tie-in series Weird World. And we also see them in the post Secret Wars run of Weird World, and a couple issues of the post Secret Wars run of the Squadron Supreme. And I gotta tell you, folks, as soon as I saw them, I was so happy. Because like, oh my gosh, it's Crystar, it's the Magma Man. Oh, that is so awesome! I can't believe somebody remembered them. I tell you, the nerd in me was flipping out when I saw that. Because again, I love this series. I have all 11 issues, and this is a personal favorite of mine. So I was so happy to see these characters brought back, even for just a little bit of time. Excuse me. Excuse me. And it does give me hope that perhaps, maybe, we can see these characters again. I hope so. I mean, it's too much for me to hope for, a new series, but come on, maybe a few more little guest appearances, maybe something. Yeah. I would love to see a new comic book series, but again, yeah, I know that's not going to happen. But come on, Marvel, give me and the few Crystar fans who are out there, and there've got to be some out there, a little bit more. Give us some guest appearances, please, come on, please, Marvel, I'm begging you, please do it. There, with that out of the way, I guess it's conclusion time, folks. I love this series. Excuse me, I love this series. It's fun, it's interesting, it's, something we haven't seen before. I love the dynamic between Crystar and Moltar. I love all the characters in this comic book because they're just very interesting, very well written. The artwork is wonderful. Crystallium really does feel like its own unique world that we haven't seen before. Even though I might prefer some issues more than others in terms of artwork, to me, it's all good in its own way. So yes, folks, I mean, if you have a chance to pick up this comic book, please do. It is fun. I can't say much of it. I love Crystar. Well, that's it, folks. That's all I have to say about this comic book. So please, feel free to comment below. But please, I always say, be respectful to me and to each other. So, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.